The Phantom Ship, 18th century, high seas. The year was 1713, and tales of the cursed galleon, the Revenant, had spread like wildfire across the ports of the Caribbean. Sailors spoke in hushed voices of the ship that had once been captained by the infamous pirate William Iron Fist Graves. According to the legend, the Revenant had set sail one fateful night in search of a treasure hidden on a remote island. But when the ship returned, only one man stumbled ashore, half mad and raving about a ghostly vessel that had haunted their journey. The crew had vanished without a trace, and the treasure, if it ever existed, was never found. Years passed, and the story of the Revenant slipped into the shadows, considered just another sailor's myth to scare landlubbers. That is, until Captain Elias Thorne, a weathered and ambitious pirate with a taste for danger, decided to tempt fate. Thorne had heard rumors that the Revenant's treasure was still out there, waiting to be claimed. Dismissing the curse as nonsense, he gathered a crew of the bravest or most foolhardy men he could find and set sail into the same cursed waters where the Revenant had disappeared. The crew of the Crimson Serpent was hardened by years at sea, but even they felt uneasy as they ventured further into the unknown. The ocean grew eerily still, and the sky hung heavy with dark clouds that seemed to follow their ship no matter how far they sailed. At night, the wind would howl through the rigging, whispering the names of the long-dead crew of the Revenant. "We're sailing into the devil's own grip," muttered Thomas Vane, Thorne's first mate, as they neared the coordinates of the last known sighting of the cursed ship. "Superstitious nonsense," Thorne barked, though even his voice had lost its usual confidence. "We'll find the treasure, and we'll be richer than kings." But as the days dragged on, the mood aboard the Crimson Serpent grew darker. Strange things began to happen. Food spoiled in the blink of an eye. The water turned brackish despite being drawn fresh just the day before. The crew reported seeing figures in the mist, shadows that moved just beyond the edge of their vision, that always watching but never close enough to be clearly seen. And then on the seventh night, the Phantom appeared. It was near midnight when the lookout, a young sailor named Jacob, screamed from the crow's nest. "Ship, dead ahead." Thorne rushed to the deck, and his heart nearly stopped. There, cutting through the thick fog, was the outline of a massive ship, its sails torn and flapping in a wind that didn't exist. The ship was black as night, its wood rotted but somehow still floating. And on its tattered flag, barely visible in the moonlight, was the unmistakable symbol of the Revenant, a skull with iron chains wrapped around it. "God help us," Vane whispered. "It's the Revenant." Thorne gripped the railing, his knuckles white. "We don't run from ghosts," he snarled. "Prepare to board." But before they could act, the Revenant vanished, dissolving into the mist as if it had never been there. The crew stood in stunned silence, hearts pounding in their chests. Thorne's eyes were wild, but he refused to believe what he had seen. "It's just a trick of the fog. Get back to your posts." Yet the terror had already taken root. The men murmured about the curse, about the ghostly ship that claimed the souls of all who sought its treasure. Fear gnawed at their minds, and sleep became impossible. Every shadow, every creak of the ship seemed to harbor some unseen horror. 2 nights later, the Revenant returned. This time, it did not vanish. It appeared out of the darkness, its ghostly hull gliding silently through the water, no longer just a mirage but something all too real. The air grew deathly cold, and the crew of the Crimson Serpent stood frozen in terror as the Revenant closed in. From the deck of the cursed ship, figures emerged. Gaunt, spectral shapes with hollow eyes and twisted faces. They were the crew of the Revenant, but they were no longer living men. They were ghosts, damned souls bound to the cursed galleon for eternity. Without warning, the Revenant rammed into the Crimson Serpent, its ghostly crew swarming aboard like a wave of death. The men screamed and fought, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the apparitions, while the ghosts tore at them with icy spectral hands. One by one, the crew of the Crimson Serpent was dragged into the depths of the Revenant, their cries swallowed by the night. Captain Thorne fought with all his might, but as he turned to flee, he found himself face to face with the ghost of Captain Iron Fist Graves himself. The long-dead pirate grinned, his eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. "You sought my treasure," Graves whispered, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. Now you'll join my crew." Thorn's scream was cut short as Graves' hand closed around his throat, pulling him into the shadowy depths of the Revenant. By dawn, the Crimson Serpent was adrift, empty save for one man. Thomas Vane, shaken and barely alive, was found days later by a passing merchant ship. He told the tale of the Revenant, of the cursed treasure and the fate of his crew. But like the sailor before him, no one believed him. They said he was mad, that the sea had claimed his sanity along with his comrades. But Vane knew the truth. He had seen the faces of the damned, heard their whispers in the wind. And as he sailed away from those cursed waters, he could still feel their eyes watching him, waiting for the day when he too would be called back to join the crew of the Revenant. Because once you set sail for the cursed treasure, there is no escape.